The Meridian Sector War College hung in space like a monument to organized brutality, its crystalline spires and quantum-reinforced halls designed to intimidate visiting dignitaries and crush the spirits of incoming cadets in equal measure. For 3 centuries, it had served as the galaxy's premier institution for military education, which was a polite way of saying it taught young beings how to kill each other with maximum efficiency and minimum paperwork. The college operated on what its administrators proudly called the natural hierarchy system, though anyone with functioning neural pathways could see it was just institutionalized bigotry with better lighting. At the apex sat the Draconian Empire's golden children, 7-foot-tall reptilian aristocrats who had convinced themselves that breathing fire and growing scales made them inherently superior military minds. Below them, occupying the middle tier with mathematical precision, were the synthetic collective's representatives, artificial intelligences housed in sleek humanoid frames who approached warfight like a particularly complex spreadsheet. And at the bottom, treated with the kind of patronizing tolerance usually reserved for particularly clever pets, were the biological primitives, a category that included roughly 40% of known galactic species but was primarily populated by humans, who had the misfortune of being both numerous and annoyingly persistent in their applications. Professor Quindar surveyed the latest batch of first-year cadets with the weary resignation of someone who had spent too many decades explaining basic concepts to inferior minds. His golden scales caught the artificial starlight streaming through the college's observation deck, and his serpentine eyes lingered with particular disdain on the human section of the assembly. 12 specimens this year, including one who had somehow slipped through the screening process despite test scores that suggested she might struggle with advanced concepts like which end of the plasma rifle goes bang. Cadet Luna Reeves sat in the back row of the human section, looking exactly like what she was supposed to be, a slightly overwhelmed young woman from a backwater world who had won her place through some combination of bureaucratic error and species diversity quotas. Her regulation uniform hung awkwardly on her frame, her posture suggested someone trying very hard not to be noticed, and her expression carried that deer in headlights quality that marked her as cannon fodder for the college's academic meat grinder. The college's cultural exchange program had been implemented 15 years earlier, following diplomatic pressure from various member species who felt that military education should be more inclusive. It was a masterpiece of political theater, allowing lesser species to attend classes while ensuring they never actually succeeded at anything important. The humans, in particular, seemed to view the program as some kind of honor, sending their brightest and most eager young people to be systematically humiliated by superior intellects. Dean Vexprime, the synthetic collective's appointed administrator, processed the semester's enrollment data with a kind of ruthless efficiency that had made artificial intelligences the galaxy's premier middle managers. His optical sensors briefly focused on Luna's file, noting academic credentials that fell just barely within acceptable parameters and a personal statement that managed to be both earnest and completely naive about what she was getting herself into. The first month proceeded exactly as projected. Draconian cadets dominated advanced combat theory through sheer genetic superiority. Synthetic students excelled at tactical mathematics and strategic planning with predictable computational advantage. Human cadets struggled with concepts that their limited neural architecture simply couldn't process efficiently, washing out at statistically expected rates. Luna appeared to be following the standard trajectory toward failure. She sat through Professor Quindar's lectures on 11-dimensional battlefield geometry with the glazed expression of someone trying to understand calculus through interpretive dance. Her performance in Dean Vexprime's quantum logistics seminars suggested she was approximately 3 evolutionary steps away from grasping basic supply chain optimization. Her scores hovered just above the automatic dismissal threshold, which was exactly where the college preferred to keep its diversity admissions, present enough to satisfy political requirements, unsuccessful enough to confirm established hierarchies. What made her case slightly unusual were the accidents. They were small things, easily dismissed as the kind of random mishaps that happened when primitive minds encountered advanced technology. During weapon calibration exercises, targeting systems would inexplicably achieve perfect accuracy just as she touched them, then return to normal parameters moments later. In tactical simulation chambers, environmental controls would malfunction in ways that somehow always favored her assigned objectives. Combat training equipment would develop mysterious glitches that made her appear more competent than her actual skill level suggested. The instructors noted these incidents with a kind of mild irritation reserved for persistent technical difficulties. Equipment malfunctioned sometimes. It was an inevitable consequence of operating at the cutting edge of military technology. That the malfunctions seemed to cluster around one particular human cadet was probably just statistical noise, the kind of pattern that inferior minds might mistake for significance. The semester's highlight was the annual Proving Grounds, a comprehensive competition designed to demonstrate the natural superiority of established military hierarchies. 3 species, 3 teams, 3 days of escalating challenges that would definitively establish which evolutionary path had produced the galaxy's most effective warriors. The Draconians approached it with the confident swagger of apex predators. The synthetics calculated their probability of victory at 74.3%, accounting for all relevant variables. The humans were invited to participate as educational observers, which was a diplomatic way of saying they could watch their betters compete. Luna volunteered to represent humanity in the active competition. The announcement sent ripples of what could charitably be called concern through the faculty. Professor Quindar expressed doubt about allowing a clearly outmatched primitive to embarrass herself on such a public stage. Dean Vex Prime calculated that her participation would skew the competition's statistical validity. Even her human classmates looked at her with the kind of worried expressions usually reserved for friends making obviously terrible life choices. She insisted with a kind of polite stubbornness that made refusal diplomatically awkward. The college administration, trapped between political correctness and their certainty that she would fail spectacularly, agreed to her participation with the understanding that her inevitable defeat would provide valuable data about species-level limitations. The first challenge was designed to test intellectual capacity through practical application, a maze of interconnected problems requiring understanding of multidimensional warfare theory, quantum resource allocation, and temporal battlefield mechanics. Contestants had 6 hours to navigate scenarios that would determine fleet movements across theoretical conflicts spanning multiple star systems and several centuries. Thexmal, the Draconian team's champion, approached the challenge with the kind of aggressive confidence that had served his species well in countless military campaigns. His strategy was elegantly simple: identify the strongest position, apply maximum force, achieve dominance through superior firepower. It was a doctrine that had conquered half the galaxy and showed no signs of becoming obsolete. Except that it did become obsolete approximately 47 minutes into the challenge, when the scenarios began introducing variables that couldn't be solved through traditional applications of overwhelming violence. Thexmal found himself struggling with problems that required subtlety, adaptation, and the kind of creative thinking that his species had systematically bred out of their military caste over the previous millennium. Unit 447, representing the synthetic collective, processed the challenge parameters with characteristic efficiency. Its neural networks mapped probability cascades across thousands of potential variables, identifying optimal solutions through brute force computational analysis. For the first hour, this approach yielded excellent results, positioning the synthetic team well ahead of their biological competitors. Then the scenarios began shifting in real time, introducing chaos variables and irrational actors that didn't conform to mathematical models. Unit 447's processing power, impressive as it was, began encountering the fundamental limitation of all artificial intelligence, the inability to truly understand irrationality. Its calculations became increasingly complex as it tried to account for variables that defied quantification, eventually reaching recursive loops that consumed processing cycles without producing actionable results. Luna sat in her assigned booth, apparently struggling with the same challenges that were frustrating her genetically and technologically superior competitors. Her responses came slowly, filled with what looked like hesitation and uncertainty. The monitoring systems recorded her vital signs as elevated but stable, consistent with someone operating at the very edge of their capabilities. What the monitoring systems didn't record was the way her pupils dilated slightly when she accessed the challenge databases, or how her fingers moved across the interface with a precision that suggested muscle memory rather than conscious thought. They didn't note that her hesitation followed patterns that coincidentally aligned with optimal response timing, or that her uncertainty somehow led to solutions that integrated variables her competitors hadn't even identified. By the 4th hour, Luna had quietly moved into second place, trailing Unit 447 by a margin that was closing with statistical inevitability. By the 5th hour, she had achieved a perfect score on challenges that were supposed to have no perfect solutions. By the 6th hour, the monitoring systems were registering performance metrics that required recalibration of their measurement scales. The second challenge was more straightforward, a combat simulation designed to test tactical adaptability under extreme stress. Contestants would face a series of escalating military scenarios in full immersion virtual reality, with their performance measured by objective completion rates and efficiency metrics. It was the kind of challenge where draconian natural advantages should have been decisive. The simulation environment materialized around each contestant as they entered their respective chambers, a multi-terrain battlefield where the landscape itself served as an active opponent. Mountains became valleys without warning, rivers reversed their flow mid-battle, and gravity shifted direction according to algorithms designed to test adaptability under impossible conditions. Thexmal entered the simulation with predatory enthusiasm, his enhanced reflexes and combat instincts immediately adapting to the shifting environment. For the first scenarios, his performance was everything draconian military doctrine promised: swift, decisive, overwhelmingly effective. He carved through opposition forces with a kind of brutal efficiency that had made his species the galaxy's dominant military power. The simulation responded by escalating the complexity beyond anything conventional doctrine could address. Enemies began employing tactics that violated basic military logic. Environmental changes became so rapid that traditional strategic thinking became counterproductive. Victory conditions shifted mid-battle, requiring adaptations that challenged fundamental assumptions about how warfare was supposed to work. Unit 447 approached the challenge with computational precision, analyzing threat patterns and optimizing responses with mechanical efficiency. Its artificial reflexes were faster than biological neurons. Its tactical database contained the accumulated military wisdom of 1,000 species, and its decision-making processes operated without the emotional limitations that handicapped biological minds. The simulation detected this computational approach and began introducing variables specifically designed to overwhelm algorithmic responses. Scenarios became deliberately paradoxical, featuring enemies that behaved according to psychological principles rather than tactical logic. Success required intuitive leaps that couldn't be calculated, creative solutions that emerged from understanding rather than processing power. Luna entered her simulation chamber with the same nervous energy she had displayed all semester, looking like someone who was about to be thoroughly outclassed by superior beings. The initial scenarios seemed to confirm this assessment. She moved through the virtual environment with apparent uncertainty, making tactical decisions that looked more like lucky guesses than conscious strategy. Then something changed. It started subtly, movements that became fractionally more fluid, responses that arrived nanoseconds faster than human neural architecture should have allowed. Her tactical decisions began displaying a kind of integrated brilliance that suggested she was seeing patterns invisible to her competitors. When the simulation environment shifted, she shifted with it, not adapting to changes but anticipating them with impossible prescience. The monitoring systems registered combat efficiency ratings that climbed past theoretical maximums. Her virtual enemies, designed to be unbeatable through conventional approaches, began falling to tactics that redefined conventional. She moved through impossible scenarios like someone who had written the rules, exploiting vulnerabilities that shouldn't have been exploitable and achieving objectives that weren't supposed to be achievable. Professor Quindar watched the tactical displays with growing confusion. The primitive human was not just succeeding at challenges designed to demonstrate her species' limitations. She was redefining the parameters of success itself. Her performance metrics climbed into ranges that suggested either massive sensor malfunction or the presence of capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about biological potential. Dean Vexprime's processors struggled to integrate data that contradicted basic computational models. Luna's success rate had exceeded 100% by achieving objectives the simulation hadn't known it contained. Her tactical innovations were generating new algorithms that improved the simulation's own performance parameters. She wasn't just beating the system, she was teaching it. The third and final challenge was designed to be impossible. Contestants face a strategic scenario that required simultaneous management of military, political, economic, and technological factors across multiple star systems, while responding to real-time crisis events that would test the absolute limits of leadership capability. It was meant to identify future generals and admirals by pushing candidates beyond their breaking points and measuring how gracefully they failed. Thexmal entered the challenge with a kind of aggressive confidence that had sustained him through previous rounds, but quickly found himself overwhelmed by complexity that couldn't be resolved through traditional draconian approaches. Military dominance was meaningless when victory required diplomatic finesse. Economic warfare became ineffective when opponents employed psychological tactics. His species' natural advantages became liabilities in scenarios that required subtlety over strength. Unit 447 processed the challenge parameters with increasing computational strain as variables multiplied beyond manageable ranges. Its probability matrices began encountering scenarios that couldn't be quantified, requiring decisions based on intuition and emotional intelligence that artificial minds couldn't truly comprehend. The synthetic approach of optimizing known variables became counterproductive when success required understanding unknown ones. Luna approached the final challenge with a calm that seemed inconsistent with her previous nervous energy. She settled into the command interface with movements that suggested familiarity rather than apprehension, her hands finding controls with the kind of automatic precision that comes from extensive practice rather than desperate improvisation. The strategic scenario unfolded around her, a multi-system crisis requiring leadership decisions across dozens of simultaneous variables. Economic collapse in the Outer Rim. Political uprising in the core worlds. Technological sabotage disrupting communication networks. Military threats from unknown enemies using tactics that defied standard defensive protocols. She began coordinating responses with a speed and accuracy that made her previous performance look like warm-up exercises. Her strategic decisions integrated variables that her competitors hadn't identified, addressing root causes while they struggled with symptoms. She managed political negotiations while optimizing economic recovery plans, while coordinating military responses, while implementing technological solutions, all simultaneously, all successfully. The simulation's artificial intelligence began registering performance metrics that exceeded its measurement parameters. Luna wasn't just managing the crisis scenarios. She was resolving fundamental systemic problems that had created the crises in the first place. Her solutions were generating stability improvements that continued beyond the immediate challenge parameters, creating positive feedback loops that strengthened the entire simulated civilization. Professor Quindar's golden scales had lost their luster as he stared at tactical displays showing impossible results. The primitive human had not just succeeded at challenges designed to demonstrate the superiority of advanced species. She had rendered those challenges obsolete by revealing possibilities that their designers hadn't imagined. Dean Vexprime's processors were running diagnostic routines in increasingly desperate attempts to identify the source of clearly erroneous data. Luna's performance ratings had broken through theoretical maximums and were climbing into ranges that suggested either complete system failure or the presence of capabilities that violated basic assumptions about biological limitations. The truth, when it finally emerged through carefully coded transmissions from Terran intelligence, was both simpler and more devastating than anyone had imagined. Luna Reeves wasn't just another human exchange student struggling to keep up with superior minds. She was the culmination of humanity's most classified military development program, a project so secret that even Earth's diplomatic corps remained unaware of its existence. While the galaxy's established powers had spent centuries perfecting their existing advantages, humanity had been quietly pursuing a different strategy. They had looked at the rigid hierarchies of galactic civilization and decided that the solution wasn't to compete within established systems, but to transcend them entirely. The result was a new kind of warrior, human in appearance, but enhanced beyond anything their competitors could imagine. Her semester at the Meridian Sector War College hadn't been education, it had been reconnaissance. Her apparent struggles with basic concepts had been performance art, designed to maintain cover while she systematically evaluated the military capabilities and limitations of the galaxy's dominant powers. Her accidents with training equipment had been field tests of integrated systems that made conventional technology look primitive. The cultural exchange program had been humanity's masterpiece of strategic deception, a multi-decade intelligence operation that had placed enhanced operatives throughout the galaxy's most sensitive institutions while maintaining the illusion of a primitive species seeking acceptance from superior civilizations. The implications rippled through the college's administrative hierarchy like shock waves through a collapsing star. If humanity had developed one such operative, how many others were currently embedded in critical institutions? If they could conceal such capabilities so effectively, what other assumptions about Terran potential needed immediate reconsideration? If this was their idea of a cadet, what did their actual military forces represent? Professor Quindar submitted his resignation along with a recommendation that all previous assessments of human military capability be classified as compromised intelligence. His final report noted that draconian assumptions about genetic superiority might need fundamental revision in light of technological developments that rendered traditional advantages obsolete. Dean Vexprime's final analysis concluded that the synthetic collective's computational models contained critical gaps in their understanding of enhanced biological potential. His recommendation for immediate strategic reassessment was accompanied by algorithmic updates designed to account for variables that previous calculations had failed to consider. Luna completed her remaining coursework with the same apparent mediocrity she had displayed all semester, graduated with marks that placed her precisely in the middle of her class, and accepted assignment to a routine diplomatic posting in a quiet sector of space. Her personnel file noted her as competent but unremarkable, suitable for administrative support, but lacking the exceptional qualities needed for positions of significant responsibility. The Meridian Sector War College returned to its normal routine of educating the galaxy's future military leaders, though the smoking ruins of Simulation Complex 7 served as a permanent reminder that their understanding of leadership might require some adjustment. The admissions committee began paying considerably more attention to human applicants, though they weren't entirely sure what they should be looking for. And somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, the Terran Federation continued its patient cultivation of galactic relationships, secure in the knowledge that the galaxy's premier military institution had just spent an entire semester teaching one of humanity's most classified weapons exactly how their potential enemies thought, planned, and fought. The irony was perfect in its completeness. They had thought they were educating her, but she had been studying them all along. And based on her final assessment report, filed through channels that didn't officially exist, they had apparently revealed everything she needed to know. The galaxy's military balance had shifted fundamentally, and nobody had noticed until it was far too late to matter.